All right, good morning. This is the Energy and Carbon Management Commission for the state of Colorado. It is March 6th. It is Wednesday, and this is our general business agenda. We will start with a roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Ackerman. Oh, I see you.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I hear you. Yes, thank you. Commissioner Cross.
Present.
Commissioner McGowan.
Here.
Commissioner Mesner.
Here.
Commissioner Oath. Commissioner Ray.
Here.
Commissioner Robbins.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have 6 of 7 commissioners present.
Great. All right, commissioners, let's roll up our sleeves and dive into our agenda. We start with commissioner comments. Does anyone have comments for the rest of us and our stakeholders? Commissioner McGowan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to let folks know that there was a bill passed last legislative session, House Bill 23-1069, related to the efficacy in using biochar in some oil and gas related plugging activities. And that group, which I'm chairing, it's a kind of a technical work group, has a draft biochar progress report ready to be reviewed, and it will get posted on the biochar section of our website if anyone cares to look at it. And if anyone has comments or questions about it, they can email me or give me a call. My information is on the web.
Thank you. Commissioner Messner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 2 updates. So first update is regarding Senate Bill 23-186, which directed ECMC and CDPHE to conduct some studies in the Raton Basin to identify methane seepage and measure seepage rates, as well as evaluate the quality of water produced from coal bed methane operations within the Raton Basin. Just a quick update that those studies are about to be underway. There's been contracts that have been signed for consultants associated with that, and we updated and coordinated with the Los Animas County Commissioners yesterday, and we'll coordinate with the Huerfano County Commissioners next week regarding updates associated with that. And want to give a shout out to ECMC staff, Rick Allison, who's Environmental Protection Specialist and Groundwater Investigation Lead, as well as Greg Duranlo, who's the Environmental Manager for ECMC, as well as Nathan Moore, who's the Clean Water Program Manager for the Water Quality Control Division, who participated in the update with Los Animas County yesterday and have been integral in rolling out the deliverables associated with that legislation. In addition to that, House Bill 23-1242 developed the Colorado Produced Water Consortium, and I'm happy to announce that we have accomplished our first deliverable associated with that legislation. And so we have delivered to the legislature the initial guidance documents and case studies to promote best practices for infield recycling and reuse of produced water report. That was one of the first deliverables that was associated with HB 23-1242. And I want to thank everyone that was involved with the development of that. All of the 31 members of the Colorado Produced Water Consortium were involved in developing that. The consortium collaboratively developed this report by identifying and reviewing over 130 research journal articles, best practices, and case studies, most of them provided by the different members of the consortium. And so wanted to give a shout out to the director of the Produced Water Consortium, Hope Dalton, for being integral in the development of that report, as well as ECMC staff, Arthur Kepsel, who is the Water Resource Protection Specialist, Environmental Data Specialist, Ben Jackson, who is an environmental protection specialist with ECMC, as well as Kat Campbell, who is the science advisor for data and innovation as part of ECMC, who are working collaboratively with the staff of the Colorado Produced Water Consortium to develop these reports and research as part of HB 23-1242. And also want to update the commission that an assistant director for research has been hired as part of the Colorado Produced Water Consortium. And her name is Erin Sidlako, who's the assistant director for research and has begun her work as of, I think, about a week ago. So those are my updates.
A lot of work going on there. Thank you for your leadership, Commissioner Messner, on that front. And exciting to see these things moving forward. And I would suggest that if any of our 82 stakeholders have questions about that, they know how to get a hold of Commissioner Messner.
Oh, and one other thing, Mr. Chair, I forgot to mention, we do have our next Colorado Produced Water Consortium meeting today, 9 a.m. The agenda is available on both DNR and ECMC website.
Other commissioners with comments? Great. Seeing none, we did not have any public comment sign up, so we do not have a public comment piece to the agenda. We have a consent agenda. Did anyone have questions on consent? Have a motion to approve consent.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve consent. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Let's I'd kind of like this procedural piece of taking like a quick 5 to tee up the next matter. It's an OGDP. So if staff can work on getting OGDP docket that ends in 039 up, we will return in say 9:13. Good morning, Colorado. This is the Energy and Carbon Management Commission of your great state. It is Wednesday, March 6th, and we are undertaking our business agenda. We will now take up docket number 2302-00039, an oil and gas development plan. The applicant is True Oil LLC. The applicant is represented by Chris McGowan. And looking at my agenda, it looks like we first will hear from Kevin Fletcher, an ECMC location assessment specialist. Good morning, Mr. Fletcher.
Good morning. Can you hear me all right?
We can.
Okay, perfect. My name is Kevin Fletcher. Derek Timmerman and I were the lead location assessment specialist for the True Oil Bright OGDP. I'm here to make a statement regarding errors in the published director's recommendation for this OGDP. The errors are as follows. In the title of the director's recommendation, it lists the name as Beshore 28-29 OGDP. This should state the name True Oil Right OGDP. In the first paragraph of the director's recommendation, it states that we recommend conditional approval of this Bison 4 operating oil and gas development plan. And it should state that we recommend conditional approval of this True Oil LLC oil and gas development plan. And under the drilling and spacing considerations section, it states that the proposed DSU would establish 640 acres for oil and gas development and approve up to 2 horizontal wells. This should state that it would approve up to 2 vertical wells. None of these errors change the conclusion of the director's recommendation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. Appreciate you being before us and providing some additional corrections on that front. I would note for the record that these oil and gas development plans are very large and intricate and have a lot of moving parts. And when you provide us with all of this information and there's a couple of minor typos, no problem on our end, my end, et cetera. We appreciate all the hard work you guys do. And I think this may be the first time you appear before us. And if that's not the case, I'm sorry that I forgot about you, but I appreciate you being here before us today and working with us and presenting to us, Mr. Fletcher.
yeah, this was my first time, and I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Any questions? All right, seeing none, we will next move to the swearing in of the witnesses. Mr. McGowan, do you have your witnesses with you?
We do, Mr. Chair, good morning. So if we could pull up Jessica Donahue, and then there should be, we submitted the True Oil emails as well. If we could pull all those up, that would be great. I believe Jessica's on, and it should be before we sent last night.
When you say pull up the emails, what do you mean there?
Well, when they send the emails, isn't that we submit the emails and the list of folks, and we have them signed in, they should be able to pull them up. Am I missing something here? They've always been able to pull them up online. Am I missing something here? Like in the past, we've always brought the witnesses online. We should, are they not on?
Mr. Chair, may I interject?
Please, Mr. Peskin.
We have several witnesses that could not be located, Mr. McGowan. That is Scott Headland, Dan Beringer, Eric Schmidt, or Scott Kerr. None of them appeared as attendees.
Can you give me one moment, Your Honor? I mean, Mr. Chair, it's a very odd. We set them up.
That's okay. You can call me Your Honor.
Commission, if I may also make a comment. I did speak with Mr. Headland earlier this morning. They were trying to get their equipment set up for the conference this morning. They may be logged in under just True Oil potentially.
I'm taking a look to see. Yeah, there is a True Oil LLC
That is
attendee.
most likely our operator.
That might be the whole group, you think?
Yes, yes, Commissioner, that is the whole group. It's the True Oil LLC. I just spoke with Scott. So if you can pull them up.
All right, we're working on it. Give us a sec.
Ms. Amaro, are you able to do that? It's preventing me
Yes.
from, okay.
I'm also not able, oh, there they go. I just
Okay.
tried again. Yeah.
It's a two-way street. We have to invite them and they have to accept.
Oh, it said they declined to be a panelist. It says they will be rejoining. There we go. I see them.
True Oil, if you want to unmute and visualize yourself.
There we go.
Look at that. All of a sudden, we got 4 witnesses all at one same time.
All right.
All right.
You can see us. Can you hear us?
We can see you and we can hear you. Next steps is we're going to have the Attorney General swear you in. So we don't have your names. So AG Mercer, I'll let you figure that out.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So good morning, members of the panel. I'll go one at a time and ask you each to raise your right hand, state your name, and that you swear to tell the truth. We'll begin with Ms. Donahue and then move to the boardroom.
Good morning. My name is Jessica Donahue and I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. If we could just go one at a time down the table there and do the same.
Scott Kerr, I swear to tell the truth.
Scott Headland, I swear to tell the truth.
Eric Schmidt, I swear to tell the truth. Dan Beringer, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Ms. Mercer. Mr. McGowan, that takes care of getting your witnesses sworn in. The floor, the video is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning. And also we'll add thanks to Mr. Fletcher for his help on this. He's done a great job. They were minors, just so we would add our appreciation with his help as well. Just a quick add. And good morning to you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. As you know, my name is Chris McGowan. I represent True Oil LLC. We are coming before you today for the Wright OGDP and associated DSU. It's a 640-acre DSU and oil and gas development plan covering the south half of Section 15 and the north half of Section 22 of Township 4 South, Range 53 West, 6 p.m. for the drilling, development, and operation in the Spurgeon Formation. We are hoping to develop 2 vertical wells from 2 separate locations and the associated production facilities, respectively the Wright 3415 and the Wright 1122. We with this application, True did submit to the commission. It's a a leasehold interest, as required under the rules. It was attached as Exhibit B. With the application, they also submitted their form, the relevant Form 2B cumulative impact data, document number 402-730-256. True also submitted its Form 2C certification pursuant to Rule 303A7, document number 403-455-993. With its application, it also submitted its Rule 505 testimony and a Form 2A, document number 402-730-254. With this, we also provided the adequate notice and the completeness determination as provided for by the rules. Next slide, Jessica. Please. Yeah. As we noted today, I represent True, and Ms. Donahue is the regulatory consultant. She will be providing the presentation today. As you saw, we have 4 subject matter experts with us from True: Eric Schmidt, who's the engineering, Mr. Scott Headland, the landman, Mr. Dan Behringer, the chief geologist, and Mr. Scott Kerr, environmental coordinator. They'll be here to answer any questions or provide any support in any ways if any of the commissioners have any additional questions or inquiries of the like. Next slide, Ms. Jessica. So today, the overview of kind of how we're going to go. Ms. Donahue will be starting. She'll give you an introduction, then we'll walk through the project summary overall, give you an overview. We would like to walk through each proposed location and give you the specifics, along with the timeline and the phases associated with the development of the 2 vertical wells inside the DSU and OGDP, along with an anticipated development schedule. We also want to go through some additional conditions of approval that were requested by staff that True agreed to in order to effectuate the permit and ensure that we protected the health, safety, welfare, and environment, along with some best management practices and why we have those best management practices. And then I'll wrap up at the end of the day. So with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Donahue.
Morning, Commissioners. My name is Jessica Donahue. I'm with Ardor Environmental, and I'm here today on behalf of True Oil LLC. While this is the first OGDP this operator has brought to ECMC, True Oil is a family-owned and operated company and has been in business since 1954. True has been an active operator in Colorado since the 1960s. Throughout True's longstanding history in Colorado, it has operated all over the state. True Oil is a family-owned exploration and production company operating mainly in the Rocky Mountain region, with the capability and expertise to explore and operate throughout the United States and other countries. Their mission is to work safely to increase reserves of oil and gas through drilling and acquisitions, to efficiently produce and optimize recovery of existing reserves to achieve long-term profitability, to be good stewards of the environment, and to uphold the good name and integrity of the True family. True is an Option 2 operator under the 700 rules and has an approved Form 3. True is proposing 2 locations that will develop 640 acres. Both locations are fee surface and will develop fee minerals. True is proposing to drill 1 vertical well from each location. The proposed DSU will target minerals in the north half of Section 22 and the south half of Section 15, both located in Township 4 South, Range 53 West. The relevant local government for this OGDP is Washington County. The nearest public crossroads are County Road 10 and County Road W. There are no school facilities, residential building units, high occupancy building units, or designated outside activity areas within 2,000 feet. And this area has an EnviroScreen score of 32.812.
Yeah, no, there.
The proposed right 1122 location is in the northwest of Section 22, Township 4 South, Range 53 West. The location is within non-irrigated cropland. The oil and gas location is proposed to be 3.7 acres of disturbance. After interim reclamation, it is proposed to be brought down to a long-term disturbance of 1.5 acres. The proposed right 3415 location is in the southwest-southeast of Section 15, Township 4 South, Range 53 West. This location is also within non-irrigated cropland. The initial disturbance is 3.9 acres, and after interim reclamation, it is proposed to be brought down to 1.5 acres. True submitted its OGDP hearing application July 10th, 2023. On December 28th, 2023, the OGDP was deemed complete. January 28th, 2024 was the end of the public comment period. No public comments were received. On February 26, 2024, ECMC staff issued its director's recommendation with recommendation for approval. Both right locations are proposed new disturbances. Each location will take approximately 3 weeks to construct. All construction activities will occur during daylight hours only. Topsoil will be segregated for future reclamation activities. Fugitive dust will be controlled by applying fresh water to the locations and access roads as needed. Each well may take approximately 14 days to drill. In the application, drilling activities are listed as 18 days. This includes the 4 days of rig mobilization to and from each location. This drilling estimate is a conservative estimate based on some earlier drilling activity that True participated in a few years ago in this area. Additionally, True is targeting a deeper formation than most other Washington County projects that have been brought before the commission. True will use freshwater mud only for drilling the right wells. These wells will not be fracked. Once drilled and casing has been cemented in place, the wells will be perforated and connected to production equipment. Each location will take approximately 3 weeks to prepare for interim reclamation. As per the 1000 series rules, areas that are unnecessary to production activities will be recontoured and topsoil will be distributed to the recontoured areas so that the surface usage can be returned to the surface owner and planted with the surrounding crops. True does anticipate to commence operations upon approval. This slide shows an anticipated execution schedule for the initial well. As Mr. McGowan mentioned, staff has recommended a couple of conditions of approval. The first one that I'd like to address would be the ones regarding the potential wetlands. Both right locations map near GIS designated wetland polygons. These wetland polygons are classified as freshwater emergent wetlands based on the interpretation of aerial imagery from 1975 by the National Wetlands Inventory. Both locations are in active cropland. When the civil surveyors were gathering the site information for this OGDP, they did photograph the surrounding area of each location to document the areas labeled as wetlands. These photos are shown here on the slide, which as you can see, it was in the spring, so it was in the midst of being actively growing and planted. True has conferred with staff on the proximity of these wetland polygons and has agreed to staff's proposed condition of approval, which states that operator will conduct a wetlands delineation within 1,000 feet of the working pad surfaces to confirm that no wetlands are present. The results of this survey will be submitted to ECMC via Form 4, no less than 30 days prior to the start of construction. In addition to the COA regarding the wetland delineation, staff has also recommended 3 other conditions of approval. Regarding if measurable amounts of gas are found during production, as stated in True's gas capture plan best management practices, if gas is encountered that is not entirely utilized by associated production equipment, True will shut in the well and a revised gas capture plan will be submitted via Form 4. This best management practice complies with Rule 903D. Regarding the condition of approval requiring submitting the gas analysis, this is already required as per Rule 903D2B. If gas is found in quantities beyond what can be beneficially used on-site by the currently proposed on-site equipment, True will submit this gas analysis along with its revised gas capture plan via Form 4. And regarding the topsoil sampling, True concurs that once topsoil soil test pits have been dug, results from the test pits will be submitted via Form 4. With this OGDP, True requested a lesser impact exemption from the noise and light mitigation plans. The director granted this request based on the limited sensitive receptors in the area. True has incorporated some best management practices in their operational plans to ensure the protection of the surrounding landscape. A few are highlighted here on this slide. And as mentioned previously, True did incorporate a BMP into their gas capture plan that should natural gas be produced in quantities above what is beneficially used on-site by the production equipment, True will submit the revised gas capture plan via Form 4. True Oil developed this project with the goals of maximizing the distance to cultural receptors and minimizing potential adverse impacts to public health, safety, welfare, wildlife, and the environment. We'd like to thank you for your time, and I will turn it back over to Chris.
Thank you, commissioners, and thank you, Jessica. So we would, again, as Jessica mentioned, True Oil, we would like to thank the staff for their help and their thorough evaluation of this OGDP. They were extremely helpful, and we appreciate all their dedication in helping us walk us through this process. We respectfully ask the commission for approval of the 640-acre oil and gas development plan for the development of 2 vertical wells from 2 locations in the associated production facilities, and respectfully ask for approval of the designated 640-acre DSU as well. We are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Just real quick, procedurally, Mr. McGowan, your request for approval includes the 4 conditions of approval as articulated by staff.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks. Questions for the panel from commissioners? Commissioner McGowan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation today. Just making sure, I'm curious to know if the operator has drilled in this area before and that's why they think there isn't going to be any gas associated with this operation.
Commissioner, I'm going to sort of defer that over to Ms. Donahue.
Thank you for the question, Commissioner. Yes, True has experienced drilling activities in the area, so they are versed in what could be anticipated of hydrocarbon production for the area.
Okay, thank you. And I don't mean this to sound demeaning, but I just want to make sure that we haven't had True in front of us before, that everyone knows that flaring is not a gas capture plan, that routine flaring, if you find any beyond beneficial use, would not be allowed. It feels nebulous because we don't have something in writing about what you would do if you found amounts beyond beneficial use. So just making sure we're clear on the record here about what's available for the operator and what is not.
Ms. Donahue, any comment to?
Yes, for the clarification, I'll start, and then if True feels they have more to add, they can jump in. True is aware of the ECMC rules. They are intending that if they do find natural gas in these wells, that they will utilize that beneficially on site to power the production equipment that is proposed. And they are aware that if natural gas is produced in quantities beyond what can be beneficially used as it is currently proposed on site, then they will take that opportunity to revise their gas capture plan and submit that to ECMC and work through what else can be beneficially done with that gas.
Okay. Thanks.
Other questions from commissioners? All right, I'm not seeing further questions. We therefore move into deliberations. Does anybody desire to start with deliberations? Commissioner Ackerman?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'll chime in. Appreciate the application. Very straightforward, and thank you for the information that was provided. I find that there are no proximate RBUs. It's not in a disproportionately impacted community. There's no HPH. True's proposing a single occupation, which I appreciate, and wanted to, as has been discussed today, recognize that there are COAs associated with this application, and especially with those associated with the incidental discovery of measurable gas, soil test pit data, and wetlands delineation surveyed by a certified official. I too had some concerns about the use of gas if found. This is a remote location, and I understand there are opportunities to use that on site. There are not a lot of other options, and so I would be interested to see what True will propose in the event that gas is found, and look forward to that if that's the case. With that, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to make a motion for approval, including the COAs provided by staff, providing there aren't any comments or questions from my fellow commissioners.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second, or do we have other deliberative comments?
Second.
Okay, we now have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries with the conditions of approval as an approved OGDP. Thank you, Mr. McGowan. Thank you to staff for the good work here. We wish you the best, and we will move onward in our agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, commissioners. We appreciate your time and we appreciate staff as well. Thank you.
Okay. All right. The next matter is a docket 2309-00284. I note that it's got close to an hour of presentation. So why don't we take 10 minutes, return at 9:48. And at that time, we will first hear from Rebecca Treats from ECMC, and then Jason Maxey will swear in the witnesses, and then we'll get into Kira McGee's presentation. All right, welcome back. It is March 6th. It is 9:48. This is the Colorado Energy and Carbon Management Commission. We are now ready to take up docket 2309-00284, an oil and gas development plan. The applicant is Kira McGee Oil and Gas Onshore LP. It's called the Sprout OGDP. And I believe we're going to hear in the following order from Rebecca Treats, ECMC Senior Location Assessment Specialist, followed by Jason Maxey, Director and Local Government Designee for Weld County, and then a presentation by Kira McGee after we've sworn in the witnesses. Ms. Treats, good morning.
Good morning. Hello, and thank you for this opportunity. I'm Rebecca Treat, Senior Location Assessment Specialist with ECMC and the lead for the Sprout OGDP. I would like to clarify the community outreach discussion in the director's recommendation. Director's recommendation states 2 community meetings were held, one in August of 2023 and one in February of 2024. This is incorrect. The operator, Kira McGee, mailed notices to stakeholders in February of 2023 for the Rademacher location and in June for the Clover and Alfalfa locations. Kira McGee continued their outreach to residential building unit owners and occupants in August of 2023 in the area of the proposed locations with phone calls, on-site meetings, and door-to-door visits. The community meeting was held in December of 2023 for the entire Sprout OGDP. All of this is summarized in an attachment on each of the Form 2As, and it does not change the determination of the director's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the clarification. Does anybody have questions? Great. Really appreciate you being with us. Thanks for the clarification. No problem there. And with that, we will see, it looks like we've got Mr. Maxey impaneled. If he wants to visualize. Good morning, Mr. Maxey. Look forward to hearing from you on this OGDP that went through your WOGLA process, I presume.
Yes, good morning, Chair Robbins, and good morning, commissioners. Jason Maxey with the Oil and Gas Energy Department, and I hope you all are doing well. And as always, we definitely appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak with you all for just a few minutes regarding the Weld County 1041 WOGLA process. And in this case, the Sprout Oil and Gas Development Plan from Kira McGee in particular. Some of the details surrounding this case from the Weld County perspective. First, Weld County, this has 3 locations within it, I believe, the Rademacher, the Alfalfa, and the Clover. They kind of tracked a little bit differently as far as timelines go, so I'll be specific about each one of those locations. The Oil and Gas Department here at Weld County, we held a pre-application meeting for the Rademacher location on August 31st, 2022. And on February 1st, 2023, we held the pre-application meetings for the Alfalfa and the Clover locations. Attendees for the Alfalfa and Clover locations, the 2 that we held in February, included Kira McGee staff, Weld County staff, ECMC, CPW, and representatives from the town of Firestone. And all of those attendees were the same for the Rademacher, with the exception that CPW was unable to attend the pre-app meeting at that time that was held back in August of 2022. However, at that pre-application meeting, we did encourage Kira McGee to have further communication with CPW just to make sure that any concerns or questions were addressed from that organization. The 1041 WOGLA application for the Rademacher was received August 22nd of 2023, and the applications for both the alfalfa and clover were received on October 9th of 2023. We did not receive any public comments or applications to be a part of our hearing for any of the 3 locations. So we did not have any public interaction, at least that reached out to us for any of the 3. I do want to mention, as was just discussed regarding public interaction, Weld County did encourage and Kerr-McGee did host a community outreach meeting for the alfalfa and clover locations on December 6th, 2023 at 6 p.m. That meeting was held at Firestone Town Hall. No residents or community members were in attendance at that meeting. However, both myself and my colleague, Stephanie Frederick, were in attendance from the Oil and Gas Department at Weld County. So we had Kerr-McGee's full and undying attention at that community open house that we requested, and we're appreciative that they put that on as kind of a additional community outreach event. However, as was mentioned, Kerr-McGee has performed many other community outreach activities, which I'm sure that they will detail in their presentation, but I wanted to take a minute and mention that one in particular. The hearing, the 1041 WOGLA hearing for the Rademacher was held on November 2nd, 2023, and that was approved by Weld County's hearing officer. The hearing for the alfalfa and clover was held on January 11th, 2024, and those 2 locations were also approved by Weld County's hearing officer. The final order for the Rademacher has been recorded as per our process with the Weld County Clerk and Recorder, and we did a newspaper notification on November 18th of 2023. And the final orders for both the alfalfa and clover followed the same process, and they have been recorded, and they were noticed in the Greeley Tribune on January 26th, 2024. We did participate in the ECMC process, and we submitted 2A comments. We submitted those on January 26th, 2024, and I believe they are included in your director's recommendation. So with all that being said, as normal, I'm happy to answer any questions or stay on the line if you have anything that comes up that you need me to appear again before you. But Weld County would respectfully request support of this OGDP from our perspective, and we appreciate you listening to our process and the details that we went through for a few minutes here. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Maxey. Always appreciate getting the perspective of the relevant local government, which oftentimes is indeed Weld County. Questions for Mr. Maxey? Commissioner McGowan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Maxey. I have 2 questions. One is, could you remind me, I think your requirements about who gets noticed and notified for community engagement or for information is a wider range than the commission rules. Could you remind me, please?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for that question. And that is true. So 2 things are important to note through our notification process. Number 1 is that there are 2 different boundaries between the ECMC process and the Weld County process. The ECMC takes a look at what you all know as the working pad surface. The working pad surface, I think I'm safe to say, is always within the boundary that we set, which is called the oil and gas location, which is inclusive of any area that is disturbed for construction activities. So that includes temporary disturbed areas such as topsoil staging or MLVT areas. And so our location boundary is always larger than your working pad surface. So therefore, when you measure 2,000 feet and when we measure 2,000 feet, our boundary is just inherently larger. So that's the first thing. The second thing is while we both share a definition of building unit, our definition of building unit also includes commercial or industrial type of office space. It is expanded from just a residential building unit, number 1. And number 2, for the notification process, we send notification to all property owners. Whether or not there's a building unit within that 2,000 foot, we send it to all property owners that 2,000 foot touches.
So I just want to clarify that under your rules, the 2 units that are just outside the 2,000 feet would have been contacted about future oil and gas development in their area.
As long as their property is within that 2,000 feet, then yes, even if their home is outside of 2,000 feet, they still would have been notified.
Okay, thanks. And then when I read the the WOGLA consultation, the Rademacher was coupled with a site called Salazar and a site called Brighton, and now it's Sprout and Clover. And so did that evolve as part of your process?
Yes, and I think Kerr-McGee will be better able to answer that. There has been some name changes. Again, Rademacher was one that we heard first through our process, and then the Alfalfa and Clover are the two that we heard second in the queue. And there has been some name changes. There has been some redefinition as far as what Kerr-McGee submitted and what was part of an OGDP to you all and what was not maybe. So I know that they'll probably detail that a lot better. They submitted these as 3 individual locations to Weld County. So even though 2 of them were submitted at once and we heard them together and they followed the same path, there has been some timing issues as far as how they submitted them to Weld County versus how you all are seeing them today.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions for Mr. Maxey from the commission? All right, as is always the case, I know how to find you if I need you. Otherwise,
Thank you
we'll
very
let
much.
you go, and we appreciate your presentation.
Absolutely.
Good morning, Ms. Wozlinki.
Good morning.
As is normally the case, we are now into the swearing of the witnesses timeframe. If you want to bring your witnesses up, we will get them sworn in.
Great. Thank you, Chair. We have all of our witnesses here on the hearing. If you could all just show your cameras and be ready to unmute.
Great. Good morning, everyone. I see we've got a nice sized panel, so I'll make sure I get you all. We'll just go one at a time. I'll ask you to raise your right hand, state your name, and that you swear to tell the truth. I'll begin with Ms. Friedman.
Rachel Friedman, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Mr. Little.
Andy Lytle, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Sorry, you'd think I'd have your name pronunciation right at this point. Mr. Reimer.
Joseph Reamer, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Ms. Rowley. You're on mute still.
Margaret Rowley, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Mr. Altenberg.
Corey Altenberg, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Ms. Wiseman.
Lori Wiseman, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Ms. Eichenberger.
Julia Eichenberger, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Mr. Crouch.
Tom Crouch, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Ms. Cray.
Carissa Cry, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Mr. Nelson.
Justin Nelson, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Mr. Honus.
Chris Honus, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Ms. Wozlinki, is that, or I see Mr. Rader.
Anthony Rader, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Is that everyone, Ms. Wozlinki?
That is. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioners. We'll get our PowerPoint up and I will get started. Wonderful. Good morning, Commissioners. Again, my name is Kelsey Wozlinki with Jost Energy Law. And with Jamie Jost, we represent Kerr-McGee in the Sprout OGDP before you today in docket 2309-00282. We would like to thank Director Maxey for his remarks today and Weld County for their participation through the WOGLA process and support for the OGDP. And we'd also like to thank ECMC staff and the director for their efforts on this OGDP. Next slide. So the Sprout OGDP proposes 3 new oil and gas locations to develop a total of 43 horizontal wells within 4 proposed drilling and spacing units, totaling 7,360 mineral acres for the Niobrara, Fort Hays, Codell, Carlisle, and Sharon Springs formations. The requested Form 2As are for the Alfalfa pad for 13 wells, the Clover pad for 12 wells, and the Rademacher pad for 18 wells. All 3 locations are in Weld County, and as Director Maxey indicated, the 3 WOGLAs have been approved. The Sprout OGDP also requests that the Commission establish 4 drilling and spacing units. The Rademacher pad will develop 2 DSUs. The Rademacher East DSU is proposed for 1,920 acres for 11 new wells, and the Rademacher South DSU is proposed for 1,760 acres for 7 new wells. The Alfalfa pad will also develop 2 DSUs. The Sprout North DSU is proposed for 1,280 acres for 7 new wells, and the Sprout South DSU is proposed for 2,400 acres and 18 new wells, 6 of which will be drilled from the Alfalfa pad. And finally, the Clover pad will develop 1 DSU. The Sprout North DSU is again proposed for 2,400 acres and 18 new wells, 12 of which will be drilled from the Clover pad. Before I turn it over to Kerr-McGee, I do want to address the status of informed consents and the standard of review for this OGDP. The Alfalfa and Clover pads do not trigger any ALA criteria, and therefore the review of these pads is under Rule 301. As of yesterday, the review of the Rademacher pad fell under Rule 604B4, since one of the 3 residents within 2,000 feet of this proposed location had not signed informed consent. Based on Kerr-McGee's ongoing discussions with this owner, and in the spirit of continued communication regarding the proposed development, this 3rd RBU owner executed an informed consent for the Rademacher pad yesterday afternoon. Therefore, the review of the Rademacher pad is now under Rule 604B1, which provides an exception to the siting requirements of Rule 604B when the residential building unit owners and tenants within 2,000 feet of the working pad surface explicitly agree with informed consent to the proposed oil and gas location. Based on the change in the legal standard of review of this OGDP, our presentation today does not review the 604B4 substantial equivalence standards, but instead reviews how the siting of the 3 proposed locations and the BMPs proposed on the Form 2As protect and minimize adverse impacts to public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources, and protect against adverse environmental impacts on any air, water, soil, or biological resources. Kerr-McGee did conduct a formal ALA for the Rademacher pad, as a portion of the pad is located within Rule 1202D Mule Deer HPH. In addition, Kerr-McGee performed ALA on the Alfalfa and Clover pads to assist in the overall review of this OGDP. The team will review the ALA in detail today. In addition, the team will describe the BMPs proposed on each Form 2A, how the siting and BMPs avoid, minimize, and mitigate potential adverse impacts, and Kerr-McGee's plugging and reclamation commitments, which will result in a significant reduction of emissions and the ability to reclaim nearly 29 more acres than the OGDP will disturb. So with that brief summary, I will turn it over to Rachel Friedman.
Good morning, Chair Robbins and Commissioners. My name is Rachel Friedman. I'm a geological advisor with Kerr-McGee. It's my pleasure to review our proposed Sprout OGDP with you today. We'd like to extend our thanks to ECMC staff for their hard work on this application. In the presentation, I will cover a variety of topics, including best management practices, siting considerations, air monitoring, and community outreach. As mentioned, the Sprout OGDP consists of 3 locations: the Rademacher 1430, the Alfalfa 820, and Clover 229, which together will be used to develop 7,360 acres using 43 wellbores. Neither Alfalfa nor Clover have ALA triggers. The Rademacher location has 2 RBUs within 2,000 feet of the working pad surface and will disturb high priority habitat. We have secured informed consent from the 3 owners of those RBUs. Therefore, this OGDP will be presented to you under 604B1 standards. Next slide, please. As you can see from our timeline, Kerr-McGee has been working on this OGDP for several years. Our WOGLAs for all 3 locations have been approved. The public comments received on the 2As were largely supportive, and there were no petitions filed to the OGDP. Next slide, please. The Rademacher location is proposed in the southwest quarter of the southeast quarter of Section 30, Township 3 North, Range 67 West. From this location, Kerr-McGee intends to develop 3,680 acres. Weld County is the relevant local government, and the town of Firestone is the proximate local government. There are 2 RBUs within 2,000 feet of the proposed working pad surface, jointly owned by the 3 surface owners. All RBU owners have signed informed consent. Portions of the pad intersect with mule deer migration corridor and mule deer severe winter range high priority habitat. Kerr-McGee has held consultations and informal discussions with CPW regarding this HPH that we will discuss later in the presentation. There are no other 304 B2B criteria triggered at this location. Next slide, please. The alfalfa location is proposed in the southeast quarter of the northeast quarter of Section 20, Township 2 North, Range 67 West. From this location, Kerr-McGee intends to develop 2,080 acres. Weld County is the relevant local government, and the town of Firestone is proximate local government. Kerr-McGee will consolidate facilities in the area by bringing production from the existing RUCA 2-5 location to the new alfalfa facility, and the RUCA facility will then be reclaimed. There are no RBUs within 2,000 feet of the proposed working pad surface, and no other 304 B2B criteria triggered at this location. Next slide, please. The Clover location is proposed in the northwest quarter of the northeast quarter of Section 29, Township 2 North, Range 67 West. From this location, Kerr-McGee intends to develop 1,600 acres. Weld County is the relevant local government, and the town of Firestone and the town of Frederick are proximate local governments. There are no RBUs within 2,000 feet of the proposed working pad surface, and no other 304 B2B criteria triggered at this location. Next slide, please. Rule 604B1 provides a pathway to siting within 500 to 2,000 feet of one or more RBU if the operator obtains explicit written agreement to the proposed location from the RBU owners and tenants. Next slide. The RBUs within 2,000 feet of the Rademacher working pad surface are shown in pink. The surrounding land is jointly owned by 3 siblings, 2 of whom live in the RBUs. All 3 owners have signed informed consent and support our development. There are no RBUs in DI communities, nor HOBUs, childcare centers, or schools within 2,000 feet. Next slide, please. As a result of the 2 RBUs near Rademacher and the intersection of disturbance with HPH, Kerr-McGee submitted an alternative location analysis for that pad. Although an ALA was not required for alfalfa and clover, Kerr-McGee fully evaluated the area to determine the best locations. This evaluation was also required as part of the 1041 WOGLA process. Next slide. 4 alternatives were considered to the preferred Rademacher location. None of the locations considered can develop the entire DSU that Kerr-McGee is able to develop from the preferred location. AL25 is the future site of a housing development with a potential school planned in this location. 47% of the DSU would be left undeveloped if Kerr-McGee used this location. AL27 would have 3 RBUs within 2,000 feet. Additionally, there is increased operational uncertainty created by placing the heels of the wellbores in the Longmont Fault. 47% of the DSU would be left undeveloped if Kerr-McGee were to use this location. AL28 would also have 3 RBUs within 2,000 feet. The location is within the floodplain, and 47% of the DSU would be left undeveloped if Kerr-McGee used this location. Finally, AL333 has no 304B4B triggers, but would leave 56% of the DSU undeveloped without a second location. The Rademacher location is the most protective location that allows development of the full DSU. Next slide. Kerr-McGee is able to avoid impacts at the alfalfa and clover locations by siting outside of HPH, and will avoid impacts to wildlife by maintaining timing stipulations associated with mule deer at Rademacher. We will minimize impacts to wildlife by plugging and abandoning 7 wells and reclaiming 4 facilities in HPH. This will result in the removal of 8 tanks and restoration of 3.2 acres of high priority habitat. Kerr-McGee will perform surveys for burrowing owls and raptors prior to construction. If birds are found, Kerr-McGee will consult with CPW. Kerr-McGee has held 2 formal consultations and had numerous informal interactions with CPW and will adhere to the recommendations provided during those consultations. We will pay $13,750 in direct impact fees to CPW to be utilized to offset impacts. Next slide, please. 3 locations were considered other than the alfalfa location. AL16 would require extremely complex laterals. As the alfalfa location is planned now, we are pushing the boundaries of our drilling capabilities. We considered AL20, but were unable to come to an agreement with the surface owner. An AL21 was also considered, but the added 3,200 feet pushes us beyond our drilling capabilities. Next slide. 3 locations were also considered other than the Clover location. At AL20, we were unable to come to an agreement with the surface owner. At the time of the analysis, both AL29 and AL29S had existing RBUs within 2,000 feet and a substantial number of platted lots within 2,000 feet. Next slide, please. Kerr-McGee's intended development schedule is shown here. In order to abide by mule deer timing stipulations, Kerr-McGee must develop the Rademacher pad over 2 summers. Faster drilling speeds and improved drilling techniques will result in less time on location for all 3 pads. Next slide, please. The Longmont Fault runs through the Rademacher East DSU. This is a major basement-involved fault with up to 215 feet of throw in the Rademacher area. The Rademacher location is in a unique position that allows Kerr-McGee to develop 3,680 acres with minimal interaction anticipated with the Longmont Fault. There's no other location that can accomplish this with as few surface impacts. We intend to consolidate oil and gas operations by drilling multiple directions from the Rademacher location, additionally bringing Ruka production to the alfalfa facility, as well as removing 88 wells and 22 associated facilities. Next slide, please. Kerr-McGee has evaluated the existing well bores up to 3,000 feet away from the planned sprout wells for zonal isolation. Kerr-McGee commits to plug and abandon 88 existing wells and remove 22 facilities throughout the surrounding area, reclaiming an estimated 40.9 acres within 1 year of turning the new wells over to production. We have proactively worked with the town of Firestone to commit to plug an additional 7 wells and reclaim 2 facilities, which are included in the numbers described here. After interim reclamation, Kerr-McGee will have reclaimed 28.75 more acres than the Sprout OGDP has disturbed. Next slide, please. Kerr-McGee can reduce impacts by using hydrocarbon pipelines, our extensive water on demand network, and our integrated operations center. This existing infrastructure, coupled with produced water takeaway, will eliminate over 500,000 truck trips. Next slide, please. Reclamation of 88 wells and 22 facilities will remove 40.9 acres of disturbance, 1,512 truck trips, 48 oil tanks, and 23 water tanks. This will result in reductions of 19.89 tons per year of NOx, 64.41 tons per year of VOCs, 18.56 tons per year of carbon monoxide, and 0.93 tons per year of benzene. Next slide. When we consider our BMPs related to emissions, we'd like to note that oil and gas gathering will eliminate the largest sources of emissions and over 137 truck trips at the Sprout locations. Produced water takeaway at the Alfalfa and Clover locations will eliminate over 17,000 truck trips. Kerr-McGee will use Tier 4 dual fuel engines for completions and has committed to 7 Ozone Action Day BMPs during CDPHE consultation, including committing to not fueling vehicles on location during Ozone Action Days. We are the lowest intensity operator in Colorado and work continually to reduce our emissions. Next slide, please. As mentioned earlier, high priority habitat is avoided at alfalfa and clover. We will adhere to timing stipulations associated with mule deer at the Rademacher location. Pre-production operations will be limited to the time between May 1st and November 30th of each year. Raptor and burrowing owl surveys will be performed at all locations prior to construction. Kerr-McGee will also follow BMPs outlined in the dust mitigation plan, including shutting down construction operations in the event that wind-generated dust cannot be mitigated. Next slide, please. Construction will take place during daylight hours with no need for lighting. During drilling, completions, and flowback, Kerr-McGee will use LED lights with the minimum acceptable value for safe operations that will be directed to task areas as well as inward and downward. If a complaint is received, Kerr-McGee will address the complaint and work with all parties to ensure resolution. To mitigate noise, Kerr-McGee will place 900 feet of sound walls on the full north and portions of the west and east sides of the Alfalfa location. The Clover location will have 1,540 feet of sound walls on all sides of the location. The Rademacher location will have 1,340 feet of sound walls on the west, north, and portions of the south side of the location. Next slide, please. The haul routes for these locations will take traffic away from urban and residential areas to the extent possible. Routes have been reviewed by the town of Firestone and Weld County. As mentioned earlier, the BMPs and location design Kerr-McGee intends to employ will eliminate nearly 549,000 truck trips from the roads. This includes the use of water on demand, oil and gas gathering, and produced water takeaway. The Integrated Operations Center also helps to limit traffic by allowing Kerr-McGee personnel to turn wells and equipment on and off, measure tank levels, and verify pressures and temperatures. Next slide, please. All oil-based drilling fluids will be Group 3. Kerr-McGee has submitted numerous plans with BMPs that will provide further avoidance, minimization, and mitigation measures, including management of change, a waste management plan, fluid leak detection plan, geologic hazard plan, and an emergency action plan. Next slide, please. Produced water will be removed from alfalfa and clover locations via pipeline. We scoped the possibility of produced water takeaway at Rademacher and determined that trucking water would create fewer impacts. Some of the anticipated impacts associated with installing a produced water pipeline include 45 acres of disturbance across 31 parcels, passing 32 RBUs. This would require 12 road borings and 9 stream or river borings. Additionally, there would be floodplain disturbance and HPH disturbance, including native aquatic species conservation waters and mule deer. Next slide, please. Kerr-McGee consulted with CDPHE before and after filing the Sprout OGDP. Kerr-McGee has committed to 32 CDPHE recommended BMPs on alfalfa and clover and 30 on the Rademacher location. These include using Tier 4 or equivalent engines for completions, eliminating oil storage on the Rademacher location, and water storage on the alfalfa and clover locations. Next slide, please. Our site-specific air monitoring plans have or will be approved by CDPHE. We will have air monitoring in place during drilling completions and the first 6 months of production. Air monitoring reports will be submitted at the end of each month to CDPHE, ECMC, Weld County, and posted to the Oxy stakeholder website. Next slide, please. We've been conducting air monitoring using our approved field-wide program since 2020. In that time, we have monitored 23 drilling sites, 31 completion sites, and 19 production facilities. Our program includes continuous VOC and benzene monitoring. Next slide, please. Over 8,500 benzene samples have been collected, with all results significantly below health guidance values. Next slide, please. Our outreach at the Rademacher location includes extensive interactions with the surface owners, all of whom have signed informed consent, including in-person meetings. We have sent courtesy and required information via mail and delivery. Next slide. Our outreach at the Alfalfa location has included door-to-door outreach to 4 points. In December, we held an in-person community meeting for alfalfa and clover. We invited stakeholders within half a mile by mail and posted the invitation on our website and the town of Firestone's website. There were no public attendees of this meeting. Next slide, please. Our outreach at the Clover location has included door-to-door outreach to 5 points. We invited stakeholders to the community meeting, had numerous conversations via phone or email, and mailed our required notices and courtesy information. Next slide, please. This is a summary of our engagement to date. Our stakeholder relations team is a dedicated resource for all stakeholders from the early planning stages through the full life of these wells. We go above and beyond to make sure stakeholders can easily reach us and be heard. The next slides are a summary of our specific interactions with the stakeholders around each location. In the interest of time, I'd like to skip to slide 37, but we're happy to answer any questions you might have regarding the details of our outreach. These last few slides summarize the mitigation hierarchy and how the siting, design, BMPs, and other factors protect and minimize adverse impacts to public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources, and protect against adverse environmental impacts. As mentioned throughout the presentation, Kerr-McGee has robust BMPs, including the use of Tier 4 dual fuel engines for completions, and committing to 7 Ozone Action Day BMPs via CDPHE consultation. We can avoid high priority habitat at the alfalfa locations, alfalfa and clover locations. We will pay direct impacts to CPW and adhere to timing stipulations associated with high priority habitat at Rademacher by not operating between December 1st and April 30th. Next slide, please. Kerr-McGee commits to plug and abandon 88 older wells and eliminate 22 existing production facilities in the area. This reduces visual fragmentation by reclaiming 40.9 acres. Our emergency action plan has been reviewed by Weld County OEM and all relevant fire districts. We intend to use Group 3 drilling mud, eliminating odors and emissions. In addition to truck trip reductions, we intend to use flaggers along the Rademacher haul route in order to ensure public and worker safety. Next slide. We will use sand enclosures during completions to minimize silica dust. Sound walls will be placed around portions of all 3 locations to reduce noise during drilling and completions. Kerr-McGee will use LED lights that will be angled inward and downward. Receptors should not experience any major change in lighting. I'll now turn the presentation back to Ms. Wazelinski to describe the DSU's summary and requested relief. We look forward to answering any questions you might have.
Thank you, Ms. Friedman. As I mentioned at the outset of the presentation, the Sprout OGDP requests 4 new drilling and spacing units for the development of 43 total horizontal wells developing 7,360 mineral acres. The DSUs are supported by land, regulatory, geology, and engineering testimony, including technical support for the requested subsurface setbacks. Next slide. To summarize the Sprout OGDP and request for approval, I note the following highlights. The OGDP was noticed to all interested parties and no petitions were filed. Kermagee had substantial engagement with the surrounding residences and secured informed consent from the 3 RBU owners within 2,000 feet of the Rademacher pad. Considering the siting of the proposed locations, coupled with the protective BMPs, the proposed Sprout locations protect and minimize adverse impacts to public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources, and protect against adverse environmental impacts on any air, water, soil, or biological resources. And finally, Kermagee's commitment to plug, abandon, and reclaim older locations will result in consolidated operations and the ability to reclaim nearly 29 more acres than the OGDP will disturb. This will result in a significant reduction of emissions. Next slide. This slide again shows the relief requested for the Sprout OGDP. This does conclude our presentation. We do have several subject matter experts here at the hearing, so we can take the PowerPoint down and we are open for your questions.
Great, thank you. Commissioners, we have an extensive panel of subject matter experts available for questions. Commissioner McGowan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the presentation. It did answer some of the questions I had before we had the hearing today. I'm wondering if you heard my previous question to Mr. Maxey. Are the Salazar and Brighton locations the same as the Sprout and the Alfalfa, or are they different? And has this this OGDP evolved over time? I guess that's my first question.
Yep, I can take that for sure. Yeah, so they are different locations. The OGDP has evolved over time. The Salazar location has been approved via WOGLA, and you guys heard that a couple of months ago. And that was approved as well, just as a standalone OGDP. The Brighton location, we weren't able to end up using that location. We have worked with the surface owners in the area to come to an agreement and use a different location. And that is in process right now, both with Weld County and with ECMC. That's called Hickory now. And then
I think you got it.
That's all of them, yeah.
Yep. So is the Hickory going to be in proximity to these proposed locations?
So the Hickory is about, I want to say 3 miles to the east of the Rademacher location.
Okay, thanks. It just gets a little confusing and we hear so many things in the names and I appreciate the clarification.
Yeah.
I was wondering, sorry, but thank you for putting that together. On page, I think it's 19 with your emissions reduction savings, which I always appreciate because I think that information is important. I think you have savings of pre-production emissions, which I'm not sure I understand because those would be existing locations and no longer have pre-production emissions savings, right?
Correct. So let me clarify. Only the red numbers would be the savings.
Okay, so those were the original.
Yeah, those are the estimates from our 2B, and those are, associated with each pad.
Thank you. That my brain was not working on that one. For the your explanation of the Rademacher and why you couldn't connect to produce water, I think what you were saying in your presentation is you were looking for it to connect to I guess a midstream provider or takeaway, or maybe it's your own. Did that also take into consideration hooking up produced water to either the Sprout or the Alfalfa? Sorry, the clover, the clover or the alfalfa directly to the south so that you wouldn't have, I guess what I'm trying to figure out is the Rademacher is the one actually closest to people, but that's where you have to have your production, more equipment, I guess. And so I didn't know kind of if you were talking about when you were thinking about whether or not you could pipe the produced water, whether it was to maybe one of the other locations that could then use the pipeline, or if you were considering a direct pipeline to midstream takeaway or middle person takeaway. I'm not sure how to say it.
Yeah. So the SWD that we considered using is the closest to SWD, and so that one is in it's right where that yellow line ends on the east side of that yellow line in section 22. And so that's the closest one. And this is, one of the hypothetical routes. If we were to consider using or taking that pipeline to Alfalfa, Alfalfa is just to the west of that SWD, and that's part of the reason that that we're able to pipe that produced water there. So it would really only reduce our impacts there by let's say 1.5 miles of reducing pipeline there. And all of the impacts to wildlife, floodplain, all of that is up in the north, closer to Rademacher. But yeah, it was considered.
Great, thank you so much. And I appreciate the detail about the outreach to the folks who are just outside the 2,000-foot boundary. I think I'm appreciative that you stayed out of the 2,000-foot footprint, but I'm also appreciative that you recognize that you're going to be a neighbor there for a long time and they're just outside that boundary. And so I'm glad that there was outreach to them, and thank you for doing that.
Unmute other commissioners with questions. Commissioner Ackerman.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I concur with Commissioner McGowan that this was good work and a good presentation. Lots of effort obviously has gone into this planning operation, lots of planning, consultation, good BMPs. I appreciate the thorough and well-done presentation. And I especially appreciate the produced water pipeline analysis that you just referred to. I did have a couple of questions. In the presentation, Ms. Friedman stated that the Rademacher location is the most protective location that would allow development of the entire DSU. But the ALA only included for consideration for the Rademacher pad alternative locations that would not allow development of the entire DSU. Did you consider including some locations in the ALA that would allow development of the entire DSU? And if so, why were they excluded? If not, why not? For example, relatively slight movements in the Rademacher pad would move it outside HPH. I'm sure that you noted that, bumping it a little bit north would take it entirely outside HPH, or a little bit west would remove it from the mule deer severe winter range. So why were those types of options not proposed, or at least included in the ALA, including options that would allow for development of the entire DSU? A little bit of a convoluted question, but I can clarify if needed.
No, I appreciate, and I think I understand the question. So I think I'll address first why we didn't move to the north on the Rademacher parcel. That has everything to do with our surface owners' wishes and desires for their own property. They really wanted that pad to be as far south as we could get it. And then secondly, I think I mentioned during the presentation the Longmont fault. And so this is really a major fault that can have a substantial impact on our drilling operations and completions operations. Because of where that Rademacher pad is located, we're able to drill both directions with really minimal interactions expected with that fault, which is really challenging to find any other location that we can do that. I think I'll leave it there and see if you have any follow-up questions.
Thanks, Ms. Friedman. I appreciate you addressing that. Is the surface owner in question also the minerals owner?
I will have to defer that to somebody on my team.
Thank you. And the reason that I ask is if the surface owner is not the minerals owner, it makes a lot of sense to me to talk about how you can minimize the impact on the surface owner. I personally feel a little less leeway towards the surface owner if he or she is the minerals owner and is benefiting from the development in another way. So that's why you didn't bump it a little bit north. Did you consider, and maybe this is the same answer, Ms. Friedman, for the other part of my question, did you consider other locations for consideration in the ALA that would allow for development of the entire DSU?
There really aren't very many. We did consider moving to the east a little bit in section 30, and we could not come to an agreement with that surface owner. I think that's probably the one of the only places that we would be able to reach the full DSU.
Thank you. Appreciate the additional discussion there. Moving on to my next question, I counted 8 total occupations then. You can help correct me if I'm wrong. So it was the alfalfa and the clover each had 1 for drilling and 1 for completions. And then the Rodemaker had 2 for drilling and 2 for completions. My understanding was the necessity there on the Rodemaker was to adhere to timing limitations associated with HPH. Is there some opportunity to do some of those occupations simultaneously or one after the other? For example, drill at the same time on alfalfa and clover using separate rigs or move straight into completions right after drilling. Can you talk a little bit about why the separate occupations are needed, especially on the alfalfa and clover?
Yeah, so the way we have it scheduled in front of you, we will be using separate rigs on alfalfa and clover. So we'll be performing our horizontal drilling from September to November and then October to December on clover. Yeah.
Thank you. That timeline slipped by me. That's really helpful. Thanks, Ms. Friedman.
Yeah, no problem.
On the emissions reduction, you mentioned a couple of times about the reductions associated with the plugging of wells, and appreciated the figures that you put up there. That's really helpful. Are those net figures when considered in the entirety of this development, or are they figures that were simply limited to the plugging of the wells in question? Does that make sense?
I think I understand your question. So the red numbers at the bottom on the chart on the left side, those are the emissions that are just removed from the P&As.
Gotcha. So when we're looking at I got you. Thank you. We're not looking at an overall reduction in emissions associated with this development, but there is a component of reduction of emissions because of the P&A. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. And so these are not net numbers or anything like that you're looking at. The top row, the pre-production, those are our estimates for the entire OGDP. Those are from our 2B. And then the second line is the same numbers during production phase. And then the bottom line is just what we expect to remove. So they are not, there's no summing or subtracting going on.
Understood. Thank you. I appreciate your responses. That's it for me, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you very much. Good questions. Other questions for the panel? All right, seeing no further questions, do we move into deliberations? Commissioner Messner, then Commissioner Cross.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I'll start out by just saying that the organization of the application, the organization of the presentation, the way that this concept has been laid out, I think is indicative of the quality of work that we continue to see from this operator, and so I really appreciate that. I think the emphasis on understanding the elements of the rules that are important to develop solutions for, and the pre-planning associated with that really allows some flexibility as far as how operations can be structured in this particular area, and the willingness to pivot or adapt as attempts are made to be able to meet the regulatory structure that's in place. I also really appreciate the continued efforts towards offsetting the impacts that are associated with this development, because these 3 pads it's a large development, and understanding that it's a large development and certainly has impacts associated with it. There was significant efforts in this OGDP application to offset those impacts by P&A-ing 88 wells, retiring 22 facilities, reclaiming that acreage, and making considerations for additional retirement of wells and facilities inside of high priority habitat to help offset the impacts associated with that, and willingness to abide by timing stipulations within those high priority habitats. And so I do concur with some of the questions that were asked by both Commissioner McGowan and Commissioner Ackerman, that understanding that those negotiations between a surface owner's desires and avoidance of impacts is a difficult cross-section to be in. I think that ideally, even operationally for this operator to move it outside of that high priority habitat probably would have been better for the operator, better for the situation. But understanding that is not what's being proposed, I think that the protections that have been proposed here are adequate in order to be able to minimize and mitigate the impacts associated with the high priority habitat, particularly the utilization of avoidance in the timing stipulations that were presented. And then Commissioner McGowan asked some good questions around produced water takeaway. That certainly, with this number of wells, ends up being a really big piece. And I think the operator did a good job of explaining why the potential impacts associated with developing the infrastructure to connect it south would be a challenge. But this continues to be a challenge in the DJ Basin, is the lack of infrastructure that's available for produced water takeaway. And I think that's something that basin-wide and throughout all the operators will need to continue to be evaluated, because the lack of infrastructure for produced water takeaway will become more problematic as we continue to move operations throughout this region. And so I would hope that collaborative solutions could be found to develop the necessary infrastructure in order to have that produced water takeaway, like we see on 2 of the 3 pads in this particular area. And want to acknowledge the work that this operator does with the Colorado Produced Water Consortium in trying to develop solutions for that infrastructure. So overall, this is a good application, and I will be in support of it.
Commissioner Cross.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Messner, for your comments. I'll be brief because I'm in agreement with that. I believe the offsets here are very good, not just the plugging and abandoning, but also the surface acreage disturbance being returned, returning some habitat to prevent habitat fragmentation. I think there's a lot of really good things in this application, and unless there's other comments or other deliberations, I move for approval of the application.
Thank you both for your comments. Thank you to commissioners for your good questions. We have a motion to approve the application. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. At this time, we have an opportunity for further discussion on the motion. Commissioner Ackerman?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I was going to second as well. I wanted to note that CPW found the consultation with this operator to be adequate and appropriate, and specifically stated that their concerns were resolved through the efforts of this operator and its consultative process. And while the Rodemaker pad and some access roads do partially intersect Mule Deer Severe Winter Range and Migration Corridor, HPH, the majority of wells, as was noted by Commissioner Messner, and infrastructure and roads for this development are outside of HPH in an area where there is quite a bit of overall HPH, and the Rodemaker is on the edge of HPH. There are various BMPs associated with this application that are appropriate and satisfactory to CPW, including wildlife surveys, timing restrictions, pipeline takeaways, compensatory mitigation, as was presented here today. So I do concur that this applicant examined all solutions and opportunities that were available to it in its thorough planning, public outreach and consultative processes, and I'm also in support.
Thank you, Commissioner Ackerman, for those comments. I would agree with everything that's been said and all the questions that have been asked. I would just note for the record that sometimes when an application comes before us and it has been thoroughly vetted through our process and has been, evaluated by staff for a long period of time, just because it kind of is smoothly processed at the commission level does not mean that there's not been just a tremendous amount of evaluation and application of our protective standards. Sometimes that gets lost. It gets lost on even me as chair. And I just want to note for the record that this is a protective application that has done a good job of working its way through our protective rules, and thus it is, in my mind, approvable, and I appreciate the applicant and our staff's work on it as well. Further, all those in favor of the application signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The application is approved. Thank you, Ms. Wazelinski, to you and your staff.
Thank you.
Thank you to our staff and to everyone that's listening in. It's 10:50. We've got one more to go. Let's take 10 minutes to get it set up and return at 11 a.m. Good morning. Still March 6th, Wednesday, Colorado Energy and Carbon Management Commission. Moving through our agenda, we have one other agenda matter, 230400132, an oil and gas development plan. The applicant is Keir McGee Oil and Gas Onshore LP. The attorneys are, it looks like Ms. Jost, and we will start with hearing from ECMC Senior Location Assessment Specialist, Doug Andrews. Good morning.
Thank you, Chair Robbins. My name is Doug Andrews. I'm the Senior Location Assessment Specialist. Page 2 of the COLT OGDP Director Recommendation indicates that each of the 5 proposed locations have an approved Weld County WOGLA. This is not entirely correct. While the applicant does have an approved Bronco CDP from Weld County and have submitted WOGLAs for all 5 locations, as of the date the Director Recommendation was issued, only 2 of the 5 WOGLAs have been approved by Weld County. The remaining 3 WOGLAs are still in process and waiting on hearing before Weld County. It is hoped that the applicant will provide an update on the status of these 3 WOGLA permits today. Staff continues to recommend approval of this OGDP. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Any questions on that point? All right, seeing none, we appreciate your work on this, and if questions arise, I know how to hunt you down, so thanks a lot. We now will elevate Mr. Maxey from Weld County. Good morning, Mr. Maxey. And I don't know if you heard Mr. Andrews just now, but you might speak to that point as well, given that it is your department that works the WOGLAs.
Yes, absolutely, Chair Robbins, and I will definitely address that a little bit further down in my comments. I appreciate Mr. Andrews bringing that up. So I'll just kind of go through the normal comments that we have here, even though this is not technically a normal location, since there was or is rather a CDP for Weld County, a comprehensive development plan, and I believe a CAP with the ECMC. So with that being said, I'll just jump right in. Appreciate again the time that you all allow for us to participate in your hearing. We believe it's important to be a part of your hearings to provide the local perspective and permitting process. And so Weld County, whether it's myself or Ms. Kelly Holiday, we will always have a representative here to provide some high-level comments and to also answer questions if the commissioners have any. So the COLT OGDP is part of Kerr-McGee's overall Bronco CDP or CAP. And just some things to remind the commissioners on, because this goes back a couple years. A pre-application meeting with Weld County was held in July of 2022 for the overall CDP. We held our 1041 WOGLA hearing for the entirety of the CDP back in April of 2023, and that was approved by the Weld County Hearing Office. We've said this before, but I'll repeat it for the record. In Weld County's opinion, CDPs and ECMC caps are good planning tools from our perspective. We're able to gain further insight into future development plans. We're able to consider full development areas when looking at cumulative impacts, or from surface related type items, more importantly, infrastructure related type things. They create on Weld County's side a public record of full phase development, which helps to prevent us when we're looking at other future land use items. It helps us to look from a land use compatibility perspective and recognize any potential conflicts down the road. So we appreciate larger plans such as this that can take a look down the road for longer term development. Once the overall CDP, along with the specific siting of locations, has been approved through Weld County, the operators submit site-specific 1041 WOGLA information, which details elements that are specific to the individual locations. These are intentionally submitted closer to the time of construction because we feel that avoids the need for multiple sundries down the road as technology advances or as certain things within may be slightly modified. Construction of the oil and gas location, which is authorized by the CDP, will not commence, though, until our staff has issued a determination that based on that site-specific information submitted, the proposed location and site-specific BMPs are consistent with the information provided in the overall CDP application and which is compliant with the requirements of the Weld County Code. Site-specific conditions of approval may be included with the specific locations based on our evaluation, our discussions with ECMC staff or other referral entities, and with the operator when necessitated for those site-specific locations and the surrounding land uses. So as long as the site-specific 1041 WOGLA that's submitted does not introduce any significant changes to a location, a couple of those bigger items which may cause us concern are actually moving a location to somewhere else that is different than what the CDP overall hearing looked at, or expansion of the surface disturbance. As long as those don't happen, then the site-specific details are reviewed and approved through the administrative process because the hearing officer has already determined the siting at the overall CDP hearing, which I mentioned was back in April of 2023. I do want to go back a little bit and make mention that within the overall time period from the pre-app to the actual application and the hearing, in August of 2022, CPW conducted a field visit. In reading the director's recommendation, it appears that there was a lot more on-site CPW consultations, which is great, but I wanted to pull out the August 2022 one in particular because Weld County representatives were in attendance at that on-site CPW consultation. Now to just speak real quickly about the individual locations. And again, I do appreciate Mr. Andrews' update because he is correct. At the time of the director's recommendation, I could see how there's a little bit of discrepancy, but hopefully my information that's going to follow here will clear that up because there has been some recent updates on the locations. So there are 5 locations within this OGDP in front of you. I'm going to go through them kind of in order of how we processed the individual locations. The High Chaparral location, 15-23HZ, was administratively approved on October 2nd, 2023, and published and recorded. So we record these as well. So it was approved, recorded, and then it was published in the Greeley Tribune on October 6th of 2023. The Roan Angel 5-23 was administratively approved on November 28th, 2023, and recorded, and then published in the Greeley Tribune December 1st, 2023. The East Street 1422 location administratively approved on February 29th, 2024, and recorded, and then published in the Greeley Tribune on March 6th, today, 2024. The Hickory Miguel 8-2 location administratively approved yesterday, March 5th, and is being recorded, and then it will be published in the Greeley Tribune on March 8th of 2024. And similarly, the Daniel Boone 8-15 was administratively approved yesterday, March 5th, and will be recorded and then published in the Greeley Tribune on March 8th, 2024. So hopefully those dates help pair with the director recommendation along with the update Mr. Andrews gave, because we did recently approve those 2 site-specific locations of the Daniel Boone and Hickory specifically. And the 2A comments from Will County, we submitted those for all 5 locations, which make up this OGDP on January 16th of 2024. So with all that being said, Will County does not have any concerns with the OGDP under your consideration, and we would support your consideration for approval of these locations. So thank you very much again, Chair and Commissioners, for the ability to speak on those. Happy to answer any questions regarding our review of the locations that you all are reviewing today. Thank you.
So to summarize, Mr. Maxey, all 5 locations that are contemplated in the COLT before us today have now received their approvals. They may be in the process of vesting them through publication, et cetera, but they have been approved and will move forward.
Yes, sir, that is correct. And again, these last 2 that we reviewed will be published in 2 days on March 8th, which again, as you mentioned, per our code and state statute, create that vested property right. So yes, we have no concerns with these. We have fully reviewed them, and they will be published here in a couple days.
All right. Other questions or clarifications from Mr. Maxey? Thank you very much, Mr. Maxey, for being with us. We'll track you down if we need to, but appreciate the participation with us at the beginning of the hearing.
Absolutely. Thank you again for your time.
All right. Next procedural step, Ms. Jost, good morning, or yep, still morning. Good to have you with us. If you want to daylight all your witnesses, we'll move through the swearing in.
Absolutely. And Ms. Coleman, oh, there we go. If we can just have everyone come on screen, and then Ms. Coleman will pull the PowerPoint up after everyone gets sworn in. All right, looks like I can see everyone but Mr. Honus.
And if it's okay with the chair, I would ask that anyone who I swore in for the previous docket just be advised that you remain under oath, and you can go ahead and turn your screens off, and then I can just swear in any new panelists.
Love the procedural efficiencies, Ms. Mercer.
Absolutely. All right. So it looks like just Mr. Picara, or okay, I see a few of you. I'll begin with Mr. Picara, ask you to raise your right hand, state your name, and that you swear to tell the truth.
John Picara, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Mr. Landry?
Anthony Landry, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Mr. England?
Eric England, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Mr. Lytle?
Yep, Casey Lytle, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Mr. Garish?
Vince Garish, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Believe that is everyone, unless I have missed someone, Ms. Jost.
No, that is, sir. Thank you.
So that's, we got everybody either the last time and now this time, and we're good to go.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Ms. Jost, the floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you, Ms. Coleman. Well, good morning, Chair, Commissioner, staff, and members of the public. My name is Jamie Jost, and I, along with my partner, Kelsey Wezelinski, represent Kerr-McGee Oil and Gas Onshore LP in this docket number 2304-00132 and the Colt OGDP application that was submitted to this commission on April 19th, 2023. The Colt OGDP application contains approximately 12,160 acres of minerals within the southern portion of Kerr-McGee's Bronco Comprehensive Area Plan that was approved by this commission on August 10th, 2022. Kerr-McGee would like to thank the ECMC staff and director for their hard work on this application, the CPW and CDPHE for their consistent engagement and communication, as well as Weld County for its continued work on the Bronco Comprehensive Development Plan and the corresponding WOGLAs for each of the oil and gas locations contained in this OGDP. Slide 3, please. So as a refresher, the Bronco cap was approved by this commission in order number 407-3357 on August 10th, 2022. The order established an approximate 24,331.75 acres cap for the development of oil and gas and associated hydrocarbons from the Niobrara, Fort Hays, Codell, and Carlisle and Sharon Springs formations. Order number 407-3357 provided that a few things. The Bronco cap will expire on August 10th, 2028, but the commission may extend the duration of the cap if Kerr-McGee submits an application that meets the requirements of Rule 314C2. It provided that Kerr-McGee has the exclusive right to develop the Niobrara, Fort Hays, Codell, and Carlisle formations within the Bronco cap's boundaries for the duration of the cap. It provided that any approved OGDP, DSU, Form 2A, or Form 2 within the Bronco cap's geographic boundaries will not expire until the Bronco cap expires or is extended. It provided that Kerr-McGee is not required to separately evaluate cumulative impacts for any individual OGDP applications that would be proposed within the Bronco cap. However, Kerr-McGee did provide a Form 2B for this Colt OGDP. It provided that Kerr-McGee would receive expedited review for any OGDP application within the cap. And it specifically provided that Kerr-McGee will submit a comprehensive wildlife mitigation plan that's been prepared in formal consultation with CPW and the commission prior to submitting Kerr-McGee's first OGDP application for a location within the Bronco cap. Kerr-McGee complied with this requirement and is excited to address the comprehensive wildlife mitigation plan in detail today. The cap order also provided that the commission staff may change the BMPs listed in the cap exhibits for individual OGDP applications proposed within the Bronco cap to BMPs that are as or more protective than the proposed cap BMPs. The order also provided that staff could also add BMPs or conditions of approval to any individual OGDP application proposed within the cap that were beyond or in addition to the cap BMPs. Kerr-McGee will address these BMPs that will be applied to the oil and gas locations within the Coal OGDP today. And the BMPs were crafted in coordination and consultation with CPW, CDPHE, as well as the commission staff. In terms of the OGDP submittal, Kerr-McGee complied with all notice requirements for the OGDP by providing written notice of the completeness determination, the application, and corresponding exhibits, and the notice of hearing to the interested parties, and published the OGDP notice in Weld County and the Denver Daily Journal. No formal petitions were filed, and the surface owner supports the development of the OGDP. Finally, the director did determine that this Coal OGDP complies with all applicable requirements of the commission's rules and recommended approval by this commission. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. John Picara of Kerr-McGee to continue the presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Jost. Good morning, Chair Robbins and Commissioners. My name is John Picara. I'm a regulatory advisor with Kerr-McGee Oil and Gas Onshore LP. I appreciate the opportunity to present our Colt OGDP today and wanted to extend our thanks to the OGLA staff for their diligent work with this OGDP. In our presentation, we'll cover a variety of topics related to this OGDP, including the surface locations, development timelines, wildlife considerations, water recycling, and BMPs, among other topics listed here. We believe this is an environmentally responsible development plan for these lands. Next slide, please. To recap, the Bronco CAP was approved with 11 conceptual locations and up to 209 wells. Since CAP approval, we were able to consolidate and remove 2 of those locations and reduce the total number of wells to 141. KMOG was granted a 6-year term, and we did not seek preliminary siting approval. Next slide. The Colt OGDP is the first of 2 OGDPs within the Bronco CAP lands. Colt is the southern OGDP, which is half or approximately 12,000 acres of the CAP. The northern OGDP, called the Philly OGDP, was submitted to ECMC approximately 1 month ago. The image on the left was taken from one of the CAP exhibits. The highlighted show modifications to 3 of the original 6 conceptual locations after continued work with the surface owner. The 2 southernmost locations removed approximately 1/2 mile, and another location on the east of the OGDP was removed from the development plan. The image on the right shows the locations proposed in this development plan before you today. Next slide. The Colt OGDP consists of 5 locations and 67 wells, all of which generally follow an existing central road and utility corridor. The names of the locations are High Chaparral, East Street, Roan Angel, Daniel Boone, and Hickory Miguel. The number of wells on each location range from 8 to 18, with 3 of the locations being smaller due to utilizing centralized facilities. A surface use agreement was executed with a single surface owner in April of 2022, while the CAP was still under technical review with ECMC staff. Weld County is the relevant local government for all locations with no proximate local government. In the months following the CAP approval, we secured approval for a Weld County Comprehensive Development Plan, as Director Maxey stated. One item to note on the slide, since this presentation was provided to the ECMC, Weld County Oil and Gas Energy Department has approved all 5 1041 WOGLAs, as again, Mr. Director Maxey stated earlier. The proposed locations are in a remote area of Weld County. The nearest residential building unit is approximately 3 miles away from the East Street location. Other locations are even further from RVUs. All locations are within high priority habitat. East Street and High Chaparral are within mule deer severe winter range. Hickory Miguel is within pronghorn winter concentration area. And Daniel Boone and Roan Angel are in both of the HPH. High Chaparral is also immediately upgradient from an isolated non-jurisdictional wetland. No other 304 B2B criteria are triggered by these locations. Next slide, please. Access to these lands will be from the north off Highway 34, utilizing approximately 5¼ miles of existing road prior to reaching the Colt OGDP lands. Access to each location will be constructed from the existing road to the proposed locations. Less than 1 mile total of new access road will be constructed for these locations. Oil and gas will be piped to 2 central facilities located on the Roan Angel and Hickory Miguel locations. The effort to consolidate facilities into 2 central locations allows the other 3 to undergo further reclamation. Next slide, please. The following illustrates the extensive timeline from the planning stages to today. KMOG began working on a development plan for the acreage in the area of the CAP in 2018 and has been working with the surface owner since early 2019. The Bronco CAP was submitted in December of 2021 and approved in August of 2022. Shortly after CAP approval, KMOG submitted a comprehensive development plan to Weld County. The CDP was approved in April of 23. This was near the same time the Colt OGDP was submitted. The Philly OGDP, which is the second and last OGDP associated with the CAP, was submitted in February of this year. As noted in the slide, there were no public comments, no petitions filed against this OGDP, and the same can be said on the local permitting side for this entire development plan. Next slide. We anticipate beginning construction at the end of this year on the first location, followed by the second, third, and so on consecutively. The same cadence is being proposed for drilling and completions with year-round activity. To the extent possible for pre-production activities, KMOG intends to drill and complete one location after the next in the OGDP while staying on the ranch, which minimizes the amount of traffic on and off ranch between locations. Pre-production operations are currently planned to begin in the southern locations and work to the north. Before moving on, I'd like to mention the picture of the facility shown on this slide is our typical, what we call our oil tankless facility. Through further enhancements, these cold facilities will have no tanks for liquids, such as for produced water or oil, even excluding maintenance tanks. Next slide, please. As briefly mentioned earlier, we've been working with a single surface owner since early 2019 to come to a mutually agreeable plan to develop the minerals beneath these lands. In early discussions with the surface owner, we contemplated upwards of 19 locations, but at the time of filing the Bronco cap, we were able to reduce the number of locations to 11, which the surface owner was agreeable to. Since the cap approval and prior to filing this OGDP, we took into consideration feedback from CPW and were able to further consolidate and reduce locations to a total of 9. The surface owner is completely in support of this OGDP and timeline of development we are proposing. Next slide, please. KMOG consulted with CDPHE in August of 2022 for the cap prior to submitting this OGDP and in January of 2024. All BMPs KMOG committed to for the cap were carried over to this OGDP, plus others we were unable to commit to previously. Examples include utilizing MLVTs, committing to completely tankless facilities, water recycling, and using Group 3 drilling mud. Next slide. Following the most recent consultation in January, CDPHE's summary letter to ECMC staff stated, Oxy has achieved the highest yet recorded percentage of commitments on an OGDP for a CDPHE consultation. Now I'd like to turn over the conversation to Mr. Joseph Reamer.
Hello, my name is Joseph Reamer, and I'm an environmental advisor with KMOG. As a result of the recent HPH rulemaking, all locations in the Bronco Cap and the Colt OGDP fall within big game high priority habitat. Originally, 2 locations in the Colt OGDP were located outside HPH. However, the 2023 HPH rulemaking led to those locations within previously unmapped mule deer severe winter range now falling within it. KMOG chose to proactively submit this OGDP under the 2023 HPH, even though it was not approved at the time of OGDP submittal. Both mule deer and pronghorn herds in the area are at or above CPW population targets. CPW has been formally consulted both on-site and in meetings 8 times since we began planning activities in 2021. This figure does not include numerous informal consultations such as phone calls and emails. Highlights of these consultations include pad consolidation within HPH, collaboratively working through newly discovered isolated non-jurisdictional wetland areas, which I will discuss in more detail shortly, and development of a comprehensive wildlife mitigation plan balancing short-term disturbance and long-term environmental benefits. Next slide, please. In exchange for 3 consecutive timing limitation window relief, KMOG worked with CPW to develop both site-specific best management practices to avoid, minimize, and mitigate potential impacts to wildlife, as well as industry-leading long-term conservation initiative. To avoid, minimize, and mitigate potential impacts, KMOG is committing to wildlife-specific best management practices. For operations performed within the timing window, KMOG will install sound walls to provide sound, visual, and access impact minimization to wildlife. Additionally, KMOG will utilize a DJA basin designed quiet frac fleet and modified rigs. There are no human triggers in this area, and these BMPs are being implemented solely to protect wildlife. Without highlighting all the BMPs on the slide, I will just note that KMOG has also committed to paying the full winter indirect fee, the maximum fee CPW can charge, mitigation fees for all operations. with the knowledge that some pre-production operations will take place outside the timing window. The list on the left side of the slide meets and exceeds the 1200 series rule requirements. KMOG is committing to going beyond the ECMC requirements and being a leader in wildlife resource conservation in Colorado. Separately from just meeting the requirements, we identified a section of land that KMOG owns in the Front Range that falls within pronghorn winter concentration area. KMOG is working with Colorado Open Lands to place this section in a conservation easement to prevent all future development. By setting aside this parcel into a conservation easement, all future surface development, not just oil and gas, will be precluded from occurring. KMOG is not reserving any areas on the parcel for future surface, nor are we taking any tax benefits available to us at the state level. Timing relief allows KMOG to increase their water recycling volumes by 50% on the ranch, allows for development outside the ozone action seasons, and reduces, if not eliminates, truck trips associated with moving off the ranch a rig and completion crew during the entire Bronco Cap development. This leads to an overall reduction in pre-production operations in big game HPH from an estimated 4.5 years down to just 3 years and 3 timing windows impacted. Because KMOG could operate all year, we can also avoid significantly increased operations during the summer ozone season. Rather, we can develop at a constant pace level, free of seasonal surges in activity. Next slide, please. This slide highlights the overall time reduction and associated impacts. In the cold OGDP, we have pads that fall in one and in both big game HPHs. The red bar indicates the timing windows being observed. Each red bar represents at least 440 additional truck trips to demobilize and mobilize on the range. By allowing for efficient development, KMOG is minimizing impacts to wildlife resources. This also allows us to meet the desires of the surface owner for faster, consistent development. It balances our development with the surface owner's ranching operations. As previously mentioned, consistent development reduces the number of ozone seasons impacted by the Bronco development and increases the efficiency of our water recycling program. Next slide, please. Our consultation and planning process also led to some unexpected challenges. One of the challenges we encountered was the discovery in the fall of 2023 of previously not present, isolated, non-jurisdictional emergent wetlands. During the siting phase, KMOG had a wetland scientist investigate the presence of wetland areas in 2022. None were found. Through consultation with CPW in the fall of 2023, KMOG further investigated these areas and discovered that due to unusually heavy rainfall in the spring and summer of 2023, isolated non-jurisdictional emergent wetlands had developed within the proposed disturbance area of the Rowan Angel and High Chaparral pads. KMOG worked with CPW and ECMC staff to adjust our pad layouts to avoid any direct impact to the isolated non-jurisdictional wetland areas. Additionally, KMOG updated our stormwater BMPs to be additionally protective of the newly discovered non-jurisdictional wetlands. KMOG requested and was granted a 12023A waiver on the High Chaparral and Rowan Angel pads by CPW. KMOG surveys all locations, not just those in the Bronco Cap, prior to beginning constructions for wetlands as part of our internal best management practices. If additional wetlands are discovered or wetlands have expanded when construction is about to start, KMOG will adjust our working pad surface to ensure that no direct impacts to any wetlands. With that, I will hand it back to Mr. Picaro to discuss our water recycling program on the range.
Thank you, Mr. Reamer. KMOG is proposing a water recycling operation to be sited on the Daniel Boone location, capable of treating approximately 10,000 barrels of water per day. Produced water will be piped from locations in the cap lands to the recycling equipment and piped to other locations for completions operations. Using recycled water will reduce the need for fresh water and decrease the amount of water sent to disposal. Starting with the first location being turned over to production, water will flow to the recycling system, then be used for subsequent completions until the last well has been stimulated in the Bronco Cap lands. Once the last well has been completed, all produced water thereafter will be piped to disposal, eliminating truck traffic associated with produced water hauling. Produced water to be recycled will be stored in closed-top tanks with emission controls, and all equipment and chemicals will be staged within secondary containment. Next slide, please. The proposed locations are sited generally along a central corridor in the OGDP, co-located near existing disturbance, which includes road and power line infrastructure. The map on the left shows the proposed development plan and orientation of the wells. The three northernmost locations' centralized position allows for wells to be drilled to the east and west, which maximizes mineral development while minimizing surface disturbance. The map on the right shows the scenario with alternative locations that are technically feasible to target the same minerals. The alternative plan moves development away from the currently disturbed central corridor. This would result in nearly twice the amount of disturbance with an increased number of well pads, along with additional miles of road, pipeline, and utility infrastructure. KMOG believes the proposed strategy is the most protective development plan to avoid unnecessary disturbance and fragmentation of HPH. Next slide, please. The proposed locations have been sited cooperatively with the surface owner over the course of many years. This plan is supported by the surface owner as compatible with the current land use and ranching operations. Any alternative plan, other than the one KMOG is bringing before you, which is codified in the SUA, is not acceptable to the surface owner. KMOG has also consulted with CPW during the CAP and prior to submitting this OGDP, and has taken into consideration the request to consolidate where possible. We have eliminated the conceptual location on the east side of the OGDP, which resulted in less disturbance in HPH. Next slide, please. Although this is a relatively undeveloped area in the basin, we are committed to plugging 5 wells and reclaiming the associated locations within 1 year of these proposed wells being turned over to production. Removing these wells and locations will result in nearly 30 acres being reclaimed, approximately 383 truck trips removed annually, and the associated emissions. These locations to be removed are away from the central corridor. Once reclaimed, these will establish nearly 30 acres of natural conditions in HPH and reduce habitat fragmentation. Please note, the figures on this slide include those associated with a well and a location acquired by KMOG in January of this year, while this OGDP was still under technical review. Next slide, please. Listed here are a few of our industry-leading BMPs we are committed to. Our Integrated Operations Center provides remote monitoring and shut-in capabilities 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. Our water on-demand system will eliminate trucking of water for completions. The facilities will have no tanks for produced water or oil, eliminating hauling and associated emissions. Combined, water on demand in our tankless facility will remove over 830,000 truck trips. KMOG has the lowest emissions inventory intensity of any oil and gas operator in the DJ, and has already met the 2030 CDPHE Regulation 22 target. As part of our emission reduction strategy, KMOG commits to use a natural gas drilling rig with a battery and energy storage system. Next slide, please. The following slide touches on a few more of the BMPs we are committed to. Facilities will be inspected to ensure there are no leaks. Modified drilling rigs, use of a quiet completions fleet, and sound walls utilized during sensitive times will minimize sound impacts to wildlife. Fugitive dust will be controlled with strict speed limits, and water applied to roads as necessary. Water will be recycled from these locations and used for completions on other locations in the Bronco Cap lands. Next slide. Since 2020, KMOG has taken over 8,500 benzene samples across all phases of operations. All results are well below CDPHE health guidance value of 9 parts per billion for benzene, as shown in the graphs below. Monthly reports will be provided to CDPHE, Weld County, and ECMC. Additionally, a summary will be posted to our stakeholder relations website. Next slide, please. In May of 2022, KMOG held a community meeting for the Bronco Cap. All interested parties were invited to attend. Our stakeholder relations team has a dedicated website operational with current information on Bronco Cap related updates. All required notices have been sent to interested parties for this OGDP and for Weld County CDP. Last slide, please. In summary, no petitions were filed, no public comments were received. This OGDP is protective of public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources. This OGDP is in a remote portion of Weld County with locations 3 or more miles away from RBUs. KMOG has local disposition with the Weld County CDP as well as the approved 1041 WOGLAs. BMPs will be utilized to minimize impacts to wildlife in addition to providing long-term habitat conservation for short-term disturbance. A comprehensive wildlife mitigation plan for the Bronco Cap has been developed in cooperation with CPW and has been submitted to the ECMC. Consolidation of production facilities minimizes disturbance. Siting locations near existing infrastructure reduces fragmentation, along with retiring older facilities reduces cumulative impacts. Finally, KMOG will commission its largest mobile recycling operation in the DJ Basin, anticipating over 6 million barrels of water recycled and reused for the entire cap if granted relief from timing restrictions. We appreciate your time and consideration of what we feel is an environmentally protective development plan for this particular area of Colorado and welcome your questions. Thank you. I'll turn over to Ms. Jost to conclude the presentation.
Great, thank you very much. Well, to conclude, Chair and Commissioners, Kerr-McGee believes that the coal OGDP does provide protections of public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources, and is an approvable application. As such, Kerr-McGee respectfully requests that this commission approve the coal OGDP application and the requested relief set forth in the application, the corresponding joint and spacing unit applications. Thank you for your consideration of the testimony and evidence presented today. And we would request that our panel of subject matter experts join us for any questions you may have.
Great, thank you very much. Before I open it up for questions from fellow commissioners, I'd like to ask just kind of a general question. This is, I think, the first OGDPs associated with the Bronco Cap. Is that right, Ms. Jost?
That is correct, Chair.
And is the Bronco Cap primarily or completely associated with Survey Ranch?
Yes, Chair, it is. It's entirely Survey Ranch.
And can you or some of the subject matter experts talk to the world at large, not just me, about that sort of unique factor that you've got one surface owner and there's a number of different oil and gas development plans to get the minerals from that and the work that's done with that operator, how big Survey Ranch is, et cetera. I just find that to be a little bit unique and would like the presentation to incorporate a little more on that regard.
Yes, absolutely, Chair. I'd like to go ahead and turn that over to Mr. Picara.
Yeah, so this over 24,000 acres that we plan to develop here is with a single surface owner. Yeah, and actually his surface property extends past the boundaries of this cap too. I will have to send this to Mr. Garish to provide a little more color since he works very closely with Mr. Survey.
Sure, happy to. Yeah, I work closely with Mr. Survey, and he's very excited about the development on his ranch, and it's obviously a large ranch too, and he's looking forward to a good continued relationship with Oxy, and it's been very positive working with him.
And what's the acreage of the ranch?
This particular ranch is about 36,000 acres total.
Okay. Thanks. I just thought that perspective was important. I read the letter from Mr. Servey and his desire that you do the occupations as set forth and tempering that against wildlife considerations. The surface owner perspective is always important. I think at least in this commissioner's mind, it's sort of doubly important given the fact that all of these operations are taking place on one surface owner. But those are just my initial thoughts. I wanted some elaboration on that. As is the case always, I look forward to recognizing my fellow commissioners with questions. Commissioner Messner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the presentation and the information. If I remember correctly, Mr. Chair, we actually had Mr. Servey testify during the Bronco Cap, and he provided a lot of perspective on what his hopes were for the development for this particular location. And if I recollect, wildlife was top of his list as far as things that he thought were really important to protect as an avid hunter, I think he had indicated. And so I did have a few questions. It talked about a little bit in the application, and certainly it was talked about during the development and approval of the Bronco Cap. But I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit further on what were the barriers associated with electrification in this particular scenario, because I know during the Bronco Cap process, we talked a lot about this utility corridor and the benefits of the utility corridor, and there was no commitment at that time to electrification, and I acknowledge that. But I think it's important for folks to hear and understand what barriers you must have run into associated with electrification if that was not being proposed as part of the initial locations with the Bronco Cap.
Yeah, I can jump in and answer that one. So this area being as rural as it is one of the hardest pads we've probably found to try to get electrification out to that area. We are actually working with multiple utility companies still to try to get power out to the area, more for the production side in mind, as opposed to trying to power the rigs, because it is so rural and so complicated, so many miles of line, and they're actually having to come from multiple different utilities to get the power there. There is actually still a chance we may run some of the pads in this area with the rigs on highline power. But because it's so complicated, so many utilities trying to fall into place, and such a lot of distance to cover to get the power there, we wanted to basically do what we've done on most of our OGDP hearings recently and promise natural gas with the battery, with the engine management system, that'll be the next best thing. We'll guarantee it for every pad. And if we can get some of these pads to fall into be highline, we'll definitely do it. As you know, Messner, we've been saying that here for the last little while in our hearings. We have both of our rigs currently in the DJ running on highline power, and it looks like about 75% of our program this year will be able to be highline power. So I just want you to know that when I get on here and I promise that we're going to use highline if we can, we do hold to that.
Right. Thank you. I appreciate that. I can only imagine in this particular situation, there certainly was some challenges with electrification, particularly seeing how there's one service owner for the entire ranch, and there's not, population centers or municipal areas in the vicinity that you may be able to pull from. So I appreciate and understand that, and appreciate that you've committed to natural gas with battery backup. I did want to talk a little bit about the produced water recycling that's being proposed here. That to me is pretty exciting. And so some of the questions I have is, I note that if I remember correctly, 10,000 barrels per day recycling capabilities. There was some, well, I think my understanding at least is the intent was to utilize this recycling facility in order to be able to do these particular pads, but then also to be able to tie it in and do future pads in the area. Not totally understanding the full volume necessary in order to be able to do completions activities on these pads. I wonder how much is this recycled produced water going to be going to take from the overall water use on a per well basis? How much, I guess, how much freshwater reduction will this recycling program create, you know, on these existing pads that, or these proposed pads that you've got in this OGDP? Does that make any sense, or was I just confusing?
Yes, and Commissioner Eric Anglin here, I can speak to some of this. Our intention is to utilize a mobile recycle operation out on the ranch, and to be able to utilize that just as soon as the production water becomes available. So the first pad would not receive recycle, but as we continue to turn more wells on, we'll have additional water available. And the 10,000 barrels a day is a target number, but we will have the flexible operational ability to treat less when there's a smaller amount available, and then to increase and treat more as more wells come online. And so we anticipate at times we'll be supplementing the other water source demands in excess of 10% of the project as we continue to develop through the ranch.
Okay, that's good. I appreciate that. So about 10% at kind of optimal levels. Is that fair to say? Okay. I think those are the questions I have right now. So thank you for that. Oh, let me ask one more question about produced water. Sorry. Is this the first time that you've employed this at this scale? And are there any other examples of this happening in the DJ Basin from a recycled produced water standpoint? I know that there was some pilot projects that were done, but this appears to be a bigger scale.
Yes, this project affords the consolidated location with a particular landowner that allows us to be able to be more robust in this treatment process. The technology and the method are similar to some of our other operations, but we're really able to benefit because of the consolidation of this particular area.
Great. Thank you for that. No further questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Messner, for the questions. Others with questions, Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My questions revolve around the conservation easement. This is the first time I've seen a conservation easement as part of an OGDP as a commissioner, and I wanted to express appreciation to the operator for delving into this innovative approach, which I've come to appreciate and even expect from KMOG. Is the land in question to be included in the conservation easement? Is KMOG the surface owner of that land?
Yes, we are, Commissioner.
Thank you. And the easement duration, I'm assuming that when you're talking about a conservation easement, you're talking about a perpetual easement. Is that correct?
Correct. We are not putting a term on that. It will be in perpetuity.
Wonderful. And can you not necessarily go into detail, but talking globally about the terms of that easement? What I would presume is that there would be no residential surface development allowed. Sometimes they allow for agriculture, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they withhold certain rights. Can you talk a little bit about those terms?
Yes, I can, Commissioner. So as I noted in my presentation, we will not reserve any surface development rights. So as you correctly noted, sometimes with conservation easements, homeowners will preclude a certain area of the easement for future development. We're doing none of that. Colorado opens lands, does not entertain industrial activity or anything like that on their parcels. However, they do allow agricultural use. So there is the potential for agricultural use or open land use as part of this conservation easement.
Thanks, Mr. Reamer. That's really helpful. And I think you also mentioned that Kerr-McGee doesn't intend to use the conservation easement for tax benefit purposes. And I wanted to just clarify that the CE donation is intended to apply just to this project, and that there's no intent to draw upon it in the future as a type of conservation bank for other projects or anything like that?
We are not necessarily tying this conservation easement to this specific project, and it will not be used as a conservation bank per se. But when we think about our continued development, we think about our long-term conservation goals. So when you look out years into the future and our acreages that we may disturb in HPH, we will continue to note that we have offset 640 acres in high priority habitat, and we'll look for further opportunities to do that.
Thank you. So I appreciate that clarification. While it may not be drawn upon as a formal acre by acre conservation bank, it may be referred to in future projects and to some degree, for lack of a better term, leveraged for those projects as well.
It will be noted as a best management practice and highlight our commitment to conservation here in Colorado.
Thank you. That's a good way to put it. Timeline-wise, Mr. Reamer, is that easement underway? When is the finalization date, or is it already done?
We have not finalized the conservation easement yet. We wanted to see how the ECMC commission, reacted to this innovative idea that we had. But we do have a draft agreement with Colorado Open Lands. We have gone back and forth via red lines. So we do have an agreement. While it is not signed, it is finalized. So hopefully in the near term after this hearing today, we will be able to sign that agreement.
Thank you. I appreciate that. No further questions.
Others with questions? There's like 1,000 people on the wall here, but I'm not seeing anybody raising hands that are commissioner oriented with further questions. With that, we will move to deliberations. Who would like to start deliberations? Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to my fellow commissioners for the opportunity to kick this off. Predictably, this application really initially raised some flags with me because it does propose some development in HPH during the winter timing limitation periods and somewhat liberally. This point I wanted to point out was discussed and negotiated in detail between the landowner, the operator, and CPW. And CPW is supportive of the approach that was supportive of where this project ended up in its proposals. And really, in this case, the question became, is it better for wildlife to mobilize multiple significant occupations year after year in the area versus straight through development, as was mentioned in the presentation today? And this area, and I think this is a key point, is surrounded by significant available high priority habitat that animals can escape to during the disturbance. That's not often the case, as often these developments are interspersed in other types of developments. In this case, it was concluded by CPW, and I find it to be reasonable to get in and get out with expediency as opposed to remobilizing year after year, especially with all of the short-term efforts through BMPs and significant projects that will be accomplished through sizable compensatory mitigation payments, all supplemented by this permanent conservation action, which brings me to the conservation easement. Since being appointed to the commission, I've urged operators to consider how they can proactively move beyond the thought process of mitigation of the impacts their operations have on wildlife to rather how they can become part of the conservation community, positively contributing to the long-term benefit of wildlife. And while I don't take any credit for this company moving that direction, I do find this application to be a significant step in that direction. Setting aside land for conservation outside of a development area may not always be the answer to the long-term well-being of wildlife habitat that's impacted by operators. But to me, the significant conservation measures proposed by Kerr-McGee in this project to minimize disruption to wildlife through thoughtful and strong, in some cases, exceptional BMPs, such as quiet equipment and sound walls being employed specifically to protect wildlife, reclamation of legacy sites and restoration of the HPH that they occupy, and as was noted, mitigation payments that take into account full impact to HPH, even though there may just be partial impacts to HPH. These are all noteworthy. To me, this in conjunction with the ready proximate availability of surrounding HPH, all supplemented by a permanent conservation easement that benefits the impacted species in the long term to help address these short-term impacts. In my opinion, that's a positive, innovative approach that bodes well especially if it's more broadly adopted for the long-term conservation of wildlife in the state. I, for one, applaud KMOG for taking the time and initiative to consider operational procedures and careful conservation measures that one may reasonably argue have a net positive overall long-term impact on wildlife for this project. I also want to point out that I note that this operator didn't take an antagonistic stance to HPH being modified during the planning process of the project, which can understandably be very frustrating as you're trying to put together a complex project like this one. But rather, they set to work immediately to understand what potential changes may come to HPH and how they could best approach those resultant changes in a positive manner. I also wanted to recognize their proactive approach to wetlands conservation and their considerable in-house expertise to ensuring the conservation of wetlands. This was good work, in my opinion. I hope these efforts are noted by those who are watchful of habitat and wildlife conservation. They are indeed noted by me, and I'm in support of this application, Mr. Chair.
Great. Thank you very much, Commissioner Ackerman. I would echo everything you said, and I have a feeling my fellow commissioners would do the same. And I think we all appreciate your background and expertise in wildlife and summarizing for everyone that's listening in how this creative approach is consistent with the rules. And I would also thank the operator. I note from the presentation and from my understanding of this that these wells have been contemplated to be drilled and surveyed, and they've been talking with the surface owner and working on this since 2019. Obviously, in 2021, our 181 rules came into place, and I want to acknowledge the pivot of the applicant to ensuring that while they started under a rule set, they adjusted, and I believe they've done a really good job of presenting an application through a comprehensive area plan, and I want to speak to that in a sec, that is consistent with the rules. And I think the utilization of the comprehensive area plan, and this time it was without preliminary siting, which sometimes I wonder how that creates incentives for the operators. And I think this is a good example of the incentives that exist. They now have the mineral estate ownership bound up. They have an ability to be creative in their approach for 5 different locations, as is done here. And I think because they've got that amount of development that they're going to be doing in a manner that's protective, they're able to be creative, Commissioner Ackerman, in all the ways that you mentioned around protection of wildlife. And obviously, protection of wildlife is the important component here. I also note that they have worked extensively with a large surface owner, and they're addressing some of the concerns of that surface owner. I appreciate Weld County's perspective as well. But I think all in, this is a very illustrative application of a pre-preliminary, non-preliminary siting comprehensive area plan and how there are benefits to that. And I applaud all of us, all of the applicant and all of staff for allowing this to percolate through the process for a number of years and end up in a manner that is, at least to this commissioner, very approvable. Commissioner Messner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your thoughtful comments there, as well as Commissioner Ackerman. Always thoughtful comments on these OGDPs. Really appreciate your perspective on the wildlife on this one. And Mr. Chair, appreciate your perspective on the non-preliminary siting comprehensive area plans, because I think this, to me, also stood out as an example of both the benefits of landscape level planning, the challenges of landscape level planning in more rural parts of the state, as well as the benefits associated with the operator of doing comprehensive area planning, master planning, without the benefit necessarily of preliminary siting and the ability to be able to be creative with their approach to make pivots and modifications and ultimately develop, in my mind, as a better application, a better package of land use than what was initially proposed in the Bronco Cap. And so I really appreciate that. And I think that this operator, again, needs a lot of credit for the continued efforts that they may make in order to be able to do that. I also just want to highlight the work that's been done around produced water recycling on this. I think that the emerging technologies that Mr. Anglin is employing here are exceptional. And I think, again, that comprehensive area planning, that landscape level planning enables those type of technologies to be employed and, modified and refined and adapted to bigger and bigger operations or different operations. And I really appreciate this operator and Mr. Anglin continuing to go down that path. For some people, 10% recycling may not seem like a lot, but when the DJ Basin as a whole is hovering somewhere around 1% reuse and recycling in their operations, 10% is tenfold more than what we typically see in an area that has challenges with produced water volumes associated with oil and gas activities. And so I do appreciate the continued efforts and the technology that's being employed on this. And I'm really curious to hear, once it's employed, the successes and challenges associated with the technology that was being employed at this bigger level. And so to me, that's a big deal. It's a huge step forward, and I appreciate this operator taking a leadership role in reuse and recycling in the DJ Basin.
Excellent comments. Others with comments? Anyone desire to make a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move we approve this OGDP.
Commissioner Cross? Motion and a second. Are there final deliberative thoughts on the motion that is pending before us? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Ms. Jost, thank you to you and KMOG for the good work here.
Great. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioners.
And again, thanks to staff. A lot of excellent hard work behind the scenes to get us to this place. Mr. Andrews, I really appreciate the work you've done. And yeah, so with that, I believe we have concluded the business on the agenda for March 6th. The last matter was withdrawn. With that, I believe we are in a place in which we can move to adjourn. So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody, and we will see you at our next agenda.